And some of us in the public sector were very reticent to talk about pricing. And it's always very interesting because pricing has been around in fact, it was the way roads used to be operated a long time ago. At the turn of the century, most roads were priced. But today we seem to be very cagey about talking about pricing. Just about every time we talk about it, it's almost like it's a new topic. Like we're just beginning to think about pricing, when in fact we've lived with it forever. We have to do it, we have to deal with it, and it's always sensitive. Now, I'm going to just have a disclaimer that anything I say today cannot be held against me because of that sensitivity. And the notion is that when you talk about pricing, people think there are all kinds of imaginations that people have. It's government's heavy-handedness, it's taxation, it's all of these other things. But the one thing that's fundamental that we need to think about when we think about price, and hopefully that at least the way I approach it, is the transportation system cannot be allowed to just be used without managed as we have, trying to move the economy, basically. It's the economy in motion and transportation. Whether you talk about highways or railways or the transit system, it's moving people and goods back and forth. That's one of the essence of transportation. If you want to stay competitive as a region, which we want to be competitive as a region, we are, I believe, the 16th largest economy in the world. And we don't get to be that way without a world-class transportation system, without the arteries and the movement of goods and services. We get to be that way because we actually have the capacity to interact and have economic activity occur. And to continue to maintain that trillion-dollar economy and grow it and be competitive, we have to make sure that our system doesn't get bogged down. To the extent that the system becomes inefficient and you can't move goods, the rational economy will find a different way to move those goods, and it might be away from the region. So that's the imperative that we have in the planning of the system as we go forward. So trying to make sure that the first obligation is for mobility, for speed improvement, for person throughput, and also to be mindful of the user time, the value of the time that people are spending. Keeping that in mind is how you manage a system, and assuring people that when we say you will be able to get from point A to point B in X amount of time, that the system allows you and guarantees you that to be able to fulfill the economic objectives that you have. Its use. And so we have to start thinking about how we complete the system gaps that we have, how we expand the transit system to provide that choice, and also how we expand some of our active transportation components of the system, such that not everybody needs to get on in a car and drive.
And let's start with the definition of what is congestion pricing. And so basically, congestion pricing uses prices that change to help manage demand on a roadway. And a question that we get a lot is why? Why would we want to variably change prices? What's the point of this? And so the majority of drivers on the roads during rush hours are actually not commuters. And if you think about it, that kind of always blows my mind, because why would somebody be driving around during rush hour if they don't have to? But the reality is a lot of folks make trips that they could be making outside of rush hour. And so we found that pricing more than vehicle restrictions, more than urban growth boundaries, more than anything like that, is the best way to actually manage behavior. There are really 4 different types of pricing strategies. Variably priced lanes, like you see on the State Road 91 lanes, the variable tolls on roadways, which is sort of what State Road 133 in Orange County near the coast has. You also see cordon charges, which are a charge to enter a specific area. So Singapore actually has a cordon charge to enter its downtown district. You have to pay a fee in order to enter that district. And then what I would call area-wide charges, which are similar to cordon charges, but just a little different geography. So how does congestion pricing work? And at the bottom here, I have quite a primitive, perhaps ugly-looking graph here, looking at congestion pricing, but I could not pull something good from the website, so I made my own. So I like to say that free lanes suffer from what I call the Goldilocks scenario. And the Goldilocks scenario is something that you also see in carpool lanes, those high occupancy vehicle lanes with restrictions. Either those lanes and GP lanes are too hot, meaning they've got too many vehicles, or they're too cold, meaning there's not enough vehicles. And if you remember back, Goldilocks and the Three Bears and the porridge and all that sort of stuff, there was some issues with too hot and too cold. So the problem then is, how do you create a lane that has a consistent travel time and a consistent quality experience? And we found that using pricing does that. 21st Century has what we call a toll gantry, which is an overhead device that basically is able to note when a vehicle goes under the device, and it notes it by communicating with the toll transponder, which is basically just a window sticker. And so I like to say that the transponders speak with the toll gantries. The customers are then sent a bill in the mail, or funds are withdrawn from the account. There's a couple different ways to do this. Normally, folks will open an account and they will put a certain balance in, such as $25 or $35. When that balance drops below a certain point, then the funds will be usually via credit card put back into the account. There's also an option to prepay with cash for those who don't feel comfortable with credit cards. And this has been generally very popular, especially compared with toll booths and toll collectors. It's much safer. There's lower administrative costs. You need less right of way. This is how all of the variably priced lanes in Southern California work. So the concept of transportation funding has been based on you pay for what you use, what we call users pay, users benefit. And the most popular mechanism of that has been the gas tax, which has charged folks for the number of gallons of gasoline used. And the idea is, or has been at least over the past 50 years, that the number of gallons of gasoline used is a proxy for travel distance. Now, the problem with that is now with electric vehicles, hybrids, advances in engine technology, that's no longer true. You have a vehicle, we can consider the Teslas, for example. They don't use any gas at all, but they use just as much roadway as everybody else. Tolling. And tolling in reality has always been the better funding option because you're paying for the exact route that you travel. Eisenhower initially wanted to toll the interstate system, but because there were not a lot of people in Western states, especially back then, such as Montana, and we didn't have this all electronic tolling technology, that really wasn't feasible. But in 2018, that's certainly something that needs to be looked at, and something that, in fact, the National Academy of Sciences is studying as a way to rebuild the interstate system.
So I agree that there's a lot of advantage to having congestion pricing. It helps control the flow. And there's some people who say, even if you have enough money to build the freeways, you should still toll, because that gives more throughput than if you don't. So then the question becomes, what do you do with the excess revenue? And my proposal is to do something analogous to greyhound racing or horse racing. Have you ever been to a horse racing track? You know, you can admit your moral failings. At a horse racing track, everybody bets, different combinations of first, second, and third place. And if a bunch of people bet the same way you do, you get fairly low odds. If you're the only one who sticks his neck out on a long shot, then you get very high odds. But what happens is all the money is put into a pot. They generate odds based on how many people bet each different way. And the house takes out something they call vigorish, which is a percentage for the operation and profits of the house, for the racetrack. And then they redistribute all of the bets to the winners based on the odds that they obtained. My suggestion is that we do the same thing, and it would be an extremely provocative approach that would cause an awful lot of news. If you want to make the news in San Bernardino County, do this. And it's something that in horse racing they call it pari-mutual betting. Pari means betting, mutual means mutual, so it's mutual betting. They're basically betting against each other. I've proposed something that I call péage mutual. Péage means tolling in French, and mutual means mutual, so mutual tolling. And that would be that the ones who want to go fast pay the ones who want to go slow. So basically what it would say is that everybody would have a transponder. The transponder readers would cross all the lanes instead of just the toll lanes. It would encourage everybody to get a transponder. It would be a good marketing tool for the project. And then people who are paying $10 to go faster would result in the people going slow getting maybe 50 cents, whatever, based on the ratios. And you would take out the financing expense from the revenue, you'd take out the operating expense, and some nominal amount for ancillary projects that are affected by the toll lane itself. And then the excess revenue would be redistributed to the people. And it would take away this incentive to increase traffic jams.